In language, we use similes, metaphors, and figures of speech, and a plethora of other devices, all for the singular purpose of conveying ideas. We want to give as clear and perfect a portrait of our mental picture as possible, and the clarity of the ideas depend on how well conveyed they are. And how well conveyed they are, in turn, depends on how fit and appropriate the words that we use are. And what are words but metaphors and similes? After all, a word, however clear, however ambiguous, is still an example. If you think about it, the act of speech itself is selective. It's merely the exemplification of what's already present within our minds, an attempt at marrying the ideas with the best words that we have for them, or of translating the ideas into their verbal equivalents to achieve perfect isomorphism between the mental image and the verbal. It's an operation that, being instinctive and so to speak mechanical, escapes us. It's not immediately reflected upon, it's something that always happens in the background. When we happen to use examples, for example, we instinctively use the best examples that we can think of for the ideas that we're trying to explain. The same goes for the words with which we compose those examples. In reading the Quran, this background process of taking for granted the act by which particular words are used is emphasized. We're called to pay extra attention to why words are used in the way that they are, i.e., to focus on the felicitous nature of the book, the univocal tendency of every word, and by extension the univocal tendency of the sentence within which a particular word is used. Here, every word and every diacritical sign modifying its syllables is to be taken as intentional. So intentional that no other word, or even other versions of the same word, could have possibly been used in its stead. What we notice when we do this is that we're granting the book the same finesse that we ourselves have when we speak, i.e., when we select words, of choosing the best words for our ideas. We hold the book to its own standard, appreciating it, not appropriating it. This leads us to the formula, العزيز الحكيم, which we find repeated a number of times in the book. This we can call an axiom, a law codifying the concept that we've been trying to explain. Much like the Hippocratic oath in medicine, which encapsulates, or is supposed to encapsulate, the ethos of medical practice, or the oath of allegiance in which the person swears loyalty to a country. In both cases, the oath is directed towards a categorical imperative, to borrow from Kant, of comporting oneself according to a necessity, a universal ethical standard. It's that of doctors, lawyers, the military, and police. The Quranic formula, above all, expresses the same idea, in that, for example, we don't question a doctor's motivation when we allow him to do his work, or a lawyer, we somehow confide in them. We trust that they are helping us. We allow a doctor to cut and lacerate us. We understand that the process will be painful and protracted, but we never judge his procedures to be harmful. We rather assume his motive. We defer our judgment to that categorical imperative. Doctors should do no harm. They are only there to help us. The Quranic axiom is likewise used to invoke that same confidence and trust that we grant our doctors and lawyers. It is there to justify those divine actions that resist human interpretation. The same way a doctor's apparently contrarian and seemingly harmful procedures are justified by way of the Hippocratic axiom, that a doctor's prescription is hurtful, not harmful. Likewise, the Quranic formula is to be understood as God's categorical decision-making imperative. It's how He chooses to legislate, litigate, and execute upon particularly human affairs. It encapsulates all divine actions, just as the Hippocratic oath encapsulates all medical actions. It is a formula with which its true believer confronts future and present uncertainties. It's asking us, against our present myopia and short-sightedness, to confide and trust the divinely ordained flow of things. And just like with the doctor, all we have to do is simply to allow him to do his work, which requires belief, which requires confidence, which requires knowledge of his motive, which requires knowledge of the categorical imperative on which the motive is based. The formula yanks fear and uncertainty from the grip of chance and gives it structure and reason. An Appian way, so to speak, is carved out for us. It tells us that God will and has chosen the best and most appropriate and rational form from amongst a vast range of possibilities. hence why he uses it in reference to those who consciously rely on him. But what does this formula specifically mean? How did we come to this conclusion? It's made up of two words, Aziz, which we find to be the title held by Joseph, who occupied an administrative position in Egypt. That is, he both oversaw and administered. This position entails direct responsibility, that is, any given affair that went on directly concerned him. To be eligible, he would have had to have been dutiful, conscientious, and erudite. But if you've noticed, we've made somewhat of a leap here. We unknowingly define not just Aziz, but also Hakim, which goes to show that one necessarily and logically involves the other, or rather, one lives and subsists in the other. What we've been trying to explain with the example of Joseph is rather the word Hakim, not exclusively Aziz, as we've set out to do. There's something there hidden within Hakim that makes it official, that imbues it with that sense of authority and leadership, something that someone in a position of authority must have as a necessary precondition, a sine qua non, to be able to carry out their administrative duties in the first place. That thing is being in the position to do so. That is influence. He must have been influential to administer. Doctors, company CEOs, lawyers, presidents, managers, celebrities, etc. all possess this quality, to varying degrees, of course, in their respective fields and occupations. Aziz is someone who's influential, whose opinions and decisions are exalted and extolled, someone to whom people instinctively turn when specific issues and specific areas arise. Students turn to their teachers, workers to their managers, patients to their doctors. In short, it is the ascendant party within any given hierarchy, is that which we call Aziz. Hakim here is the natural and necessary predicate of Aziz. It is the executive and decisive aspect of the dynamic. The formula finally ties in all that we've said earlier, in that not only is it impossible to think of one part of the formula without the other, inasmuch as it's impossible to think of a doctor without his ability to cure, but it also shows us, so to say, the indecomposable relationship between capacity and competence. It's what we've described above as univocal, a term with which we juxtapose motive. We use doctors, in particular, as our analogy of choice to illustrate the essential remediality of the formula. Someone who describes himself as Aziz Hakim is telling us, in two ways, first in Aziz, that they have jurisdiction over whatever issue and problem that we're dealing with, that our problem, with all its anxieties, concerns them just as much, that they're just the right person to go to for that particular issue. In the other way, through Hakim, it tells us why they're the person to go to. Capability meets competence, and the sagacious nature of a Hakim, judicious, practical wisdom, or practical erudition, the act of exercising sufficient reason in any given situation, and of course, this cannot be done without having the resources with which to deal with it, which is given, just as it's given that doctors should be sufficiently equipped with the appropriate range of tools and instruments. What we observe here is how the three essential elements of judgment converge seamlessly at that opportune moment of need. In this sense, we understand the depth and implication of the formula. Reliance upon God involves him, directly and immediately. He becomes as much part of the problem as we are, seeking the best way out of the pending ordeal as those who are going through it. And his omniscience and omnipotence qualifies him as our best judge and, so to speak, chaperone, because, though surely we can be erudite, i.e., know how to escape a particular ordeal, or achieve a desired end, having the resources with which to do so is an entirely different matter. Ultimately, the formula tells us that reliance upon God in such difficult situations is the best and most erudite act that can possibly be carried out. Or rather, it is erudition in itself, i.e., the best course of action that could possibly be taken by someone in a position of need, however able and capable we think we are, because he alone possesses both the knowledge and action plan, as well as the resources with which to confront any given ordeal, at any given point, anywhere. But unlike doctors, to whom a legal issue is outside their professional jurisdiction and capacity, God pervades all aspects of human affairs. There's no need or problem that is outside his capacity, and that's precisely what Al-Aziz Al-Hakim points to. Hence the definite article, Alif Lam, in the beginning of these two words. It's that which concerns the highest and most exalted application of judgment, It transcends Nietzsche's, and it's why Joseph's position was so important, because his legislative power spanned all organs and vocations of society.